Last time we talked about effective nuclear charge. Today we are going to study the electronic configuration in many electron atoms. So this is 1s orbital and 2s orbital. In many electron atoms, 2p orbital does not have same energy with 2s orbital. It is slightly higher than 2p orbital, 2s orbital. So I'm going to induce electronic configuration of beryllium, which is 4 electrons. First 2 electrons go to 1s orbital, spin up and spin down. Third electrons go to 2s orbital with spin up. And the fourth electrons go to 2s orbital instead of 2p orbital because 2p orbital is higher than the 2s orbital. So when you measure the magnetic property of beryllium, it is diamagnetic. Because all the electrons are paired. But what would happen if 2s and 2p orbital have same energy level? Then the first electrons go to 2p orbital because in this case 2s orbital has same energy with 2p orbital with spin up. So if 2s orbital has same energy with 2p orbitals, magnetic property of beryllium would be paramagnetic. But according to experimental observation, the magnetic property is known to be diamagnetic, not paramagnetic. So this experimental observation indicates that the 2s orbital doesn't have same energy with 2p orbitals. This is above the here. So anyway, this is the orbital energy level of the many electron atoms. So we are going to assign electrons according to Hund's rule. And next energy level is 4s, 3f, and 3p. And the next level is 3d. And the next level is 4s. But 2s level and 3d level is very close to each other. Sometimes, it depending on the elements, the energy level is reversed. So for example, electronic configuration of potassium is known to be it means that the 4s orbital energy level is lower than 3d orbital because the electron goes to 4s orbital instead of 3d orbital. It means that the energy level of 4s is lower than 3d orbital. And calcium, so the remaining electrons go to 4s orbital with a spin down. And the next is scandium. Now you can interpret this in electronic configuration. It is logical to interpret that since the 4s orbital is fully occupied, the third electron go to empty 3d orbital. But the problem arose when we talk about scandium plus. When the scandium loses electrons, it becomes scandium plus. You might think that the comes from the 3d electron. The electrons removed from the 3d electrons, so the electron configuration might be 3s2. So when you measure the magnetic property of scandium plus, it is diamagnetic. But this is not. This is a prediction, but this is not. According to experimental observation, the magnetic property of scandium plus is not diamagnetic, it is paramagnetic. This is experimental observation. And the electronic configuration of scandium plus is not 4s2, it is 4s1 3d1. So this is the problem. How to explain this experimental observation? There are two ways to explain this experimental observation. The first method is very straightforward and easy to explain, and the second method is somewhat complex, but the second method is somewhat closer to the truth. Anyway, to explain this observation, I'm going to show you this graph. This graph shows the energy level of 4s and 3d orbital. X-axis represents the atomic number, y-axis represents the atomic energy level. The 4s orbital energy level decreases monotonically, but the 3d orbital behaves somewhat unusual way. It looks like. Here, potassium, here, calcium, here, scandium. So there's a crossover between calcium and scandium. So in potassium and calcium, 4s orbital is lower than 3d orbital. So potassium and calcium, 4s orbital is lower than 3d orbital. So for potassium and calcium, 2 electrons go to 4s orbital. But calcium, the energy order of energy level is reversed. So calcium 3d orbital is lower. 4s orbital is higher. Then scandium has 3 valence electrons. According to this energy level diagram, the electronic configuration for scandium must be (3d3), right? Because the 3d orbital is lower than 4s orbital, so all 3 valence electrons should go to 3d orbitals. But according to experimental observation, the electronic configuration for scandium is not this one. Electronic configuration for scandium is 3d1, 4s2. So this is the question. Even though 3d orbital is lower than 3d orbital, electronic configuration is not 3d3, it is 3d1, 4s2. How can you explain this electronic configuration? To explain this electronic configuration, we are going to need to take a look at the physical size of the 4s orbital and 3d orbital, the graph on the right. Roughly sketching, this is the 4s orbital. This is 3d orbital. Roughly speaking, the average radius of 4s is much larger than the average radius of 3d orbital. So simply put, 3d orbital is much smaller than 4s orbital, according to this graph. So let us visualize it with a bit exaggeration. Roughly speaking, this is a 3d orbital, which is very small and compact, and this is 4s orbital, which is much larger and spacious. And the orbital energy diagram looks like this. Now, scandium has 3 valence electrons. the first electron definitely go to 3d orbital because which is lower than 4s orbital. Now second electron tries to go to 3d orbital because it has lower energy than 4s orbital. But here, when you second electron tries to go to 3d orbital, the 3d orbital is occupied by another electron. So when the second electron go to 3d orbital, the electron repulsion energy increase very strong. Furthermore, the spatial size of the 3d electron is very small. So the electron repulsion energy is very high. So instead of going to 3d orbital, it chooses to go to 4s orbital. Even though the 4s orbital energy is slightly higher than the 3d orbital, it chooses to go to 4s orbital because when it goes to empty spacious 4s orbital, electron energy is reduced, minimized. So it can lower the total energy of the system. So it chooses to go to 4s orbital. By doing so, it can lower the total energy of the system. Third electron follows the same reasoning. Instead of going to small 3d orbital, it chooses to go to more spacious 4s orbital. So this is the electronic configuration of scandium. So argon core, OS2, 3d1 is the electronic configuration of scandium. This is the first method to explain this electronic configuration. There are other ways, second way to explain this electronic configuration. This is the lower part of the diagram, is the second way to explain. Now I'm going to draw this diagram again. This is the scandium 4s2 3d1. When you look at this electronic configuration diagram, you might think that instead of this configuration, when the electron from the 4s orbital go down the 3d orbital, it can be stabilized because the 4s orbital is higher than 3d orbitals. If the electron in the 4s orbital go down to 3d orbital, it lowers the energy. So instead of this configuration is more stable. But it is wrong because if you claim that this configuration is stable than this configuration, you are based on one approximation or assumption. The assumption is that even though the electronic configuration changes, orbital energy must remain same. As I said before repeatedly, in multi-electron configuration, the orbital energy depends on the electron repulsion, and this term depends on the electronic configuration. So when electronic configuration change, the orbital energy change. So if we're claiming that this configuration is stable, more stable than this configuration, you must assume that even if the configuration changes, the orbital energy does not change. Then when you compare this total energy and with this total energy, this is more stable. But the key assumption is that the orbital energy does not change, even if configuration change. But this is wrong. Actual situation appears on the right. When the configuration change from 4s to 3d1, 4s to 1, 3d2, the orbital energy increase when the configuration change. This is the energy level when the configuration is 4s to 3d1. When the configuration changes, this orbital energy level increase. Similarly, this orbital energy is when the electronic configuration is 4s2 3d1. When the configuration change from this configuration to this configuration, this orbital also increase. So this is the right situation rather than this one. So when you compare the total energy of this configuration with this one, this configuration is more stable than this one. So this is the ground state configuration. Even if 4s orbital energy level is higher than 3d1, this configuration lowers the total energy of the system. Okay. The key point is that the orbital energy level depends on the electronic configuration. When the configuration change, orbital energy change. In this case, it increase. Both 4s orbital and 3d orbital energy increase when the configuration change. So this is the ground state configuration, even if 4s orbital has higher energy than 3d orbital. Okay. Now let's move on. Now next question is how to measure the energy of the orbital energy. How can you measure orbital energy experimentally? The spectroscopy is called photoelectron spectroscopy. Using photoelectron spectroscopy, we measure the orbital energy. Let's take an example of neon. 1s orbital, 2s orbital, 2p orbital. The electron is fully occupied. And this level is called vacuum state. Vacuum state refers to the state when the electrons is in the vacuum state. The electrons are free from nucleus. The electrons actually ionized when the electron goes to vacuum state. So let us assume that the energy gap from vacuum state to 2p orbital is 500 unit. The gap between 2s orbital to up vacuum state is 600, and the energy gap between 1s to vacuum is 800 unit. To perform photoelectron spectroscopy, we are going to irradiate light. So let us assume that the energy of light is 1000 units. This is an example. So I irradiate light with the energy of 100, and the light hit the 1s electron in the 1s orbital. So 1s orbital are hit by light with energy 1000, and the electron use 800 unit of energy to reach the vacuum state. So the remaining 200 unit is carried away with kinetic energy of the electron. So when the light hit the electron goes to vacuum state and carries kinetic energy with 200 units. So the electron carries kinetic energy of 200 units. When the light hit the 2s electron, it carries 400 units of kinetic energy. And similarly, when the light hit the 2f electron in the 2p orbital, the electron carries 500 units of kinetic energy. So this is the photoelectron spectrum. In photoelectron spectrum, we measure the kinetic energy of the electron. So we obtain 3 peaks. So given this spectrum and given the energy of photon, we can determine the orbital energy. Okay. So this is the basic concept of photoelectron spectroscopy. But please keep in mind that actually when you perform photoelectron spectroscopy, what you actually measure is not orbital energy. You actually measure is ionization energy. In photoelectron spectroscopy, you measure the ionization energy, not orbital energy. We simply assume that the ionization energy is approximately equal to orbital energy. What do we mean by this one? As I repeatedly said that the orbital energy depends on the electronic configuration. In photoelectron spectroscopy, electron is removed from the orbital. So in this process, electronic configuration is changed. So when for example, when an electron is removed, the orbital energy changes, right? Because electron configuration changes. But if we assume that even if electron is removed, the orbital energy does not change, then ionization energy is exactly equal to the orbital energy. And fortunately, economist Hofmann discovered that in photoelectron spectroscopy, even if electron is removed, the orbital energy does not change significantly. So approximately it is same as the original orbital energy. So we assume that the ionization energy is approximately equal to orbital energy. Because according to Koopman's approximation, the orbital energy does not change significantly. So this approximation in its orbital energy does not change is called frozen orbital approximation. Do you know what frozen means? Frozen means that the orbital energy does not change even if the electronic configuration changes. So under this approximation developed by Koopman, we measure, even if we measure ionization energy, it is approximately equal to the orbital energy. Now next problem, that in photoelectron spectroscopy, we measure kinetic energy of the electron. The next topic is how do you practically measure kinetic energy? What is the basic principle of measuring kinetic energy? Here, a chamber, the atom is here. In photoelectron spectroscopy, we irradiate radiation and the electron is ejected with various kinetic energy. And outside chamber, we install two curved electrode. Curved electrode is installed. Two curved electrode, when you apply voltage to curved electrode, generate electric field. And we install detector far end of this electrode. So now apply voltage, then two electrodes generate electric field. And when the electron with kinetic energy pass through the electrode, proper electron can pass through the electrode and detected by detector. But if the kinetic energy of electron is much higher compared to the electric field, it collides with upper electrode. So when the kinetic energy of electron is much higher compared to the electric field, it does not reach the detector. In contrast, when the kinetic energy of electron is much smaller compared to the electric field, then it collides with lower part of the electrode. So it cannot reach the detector. So only electron with proper kinetic energy can pass through the curved electrode and be detected by detector. So this kind of two electrode is some kind of filtering process, provide filtering process. When you apply proper voltage, or electrons with proper kinetic energy can only be detected by a detector. So in this way, you can determine the kinetic energy spectrum. How do you determine kinetic energy? How much voltage depends on the proper kinetic energy to measure the kinetic energy of electron. This is a basic principle of the photoelectron spectroscopy. And using this technique, scientists measure the orbital energy of the various elements in the periodic table. So x-axis represents the atomic number, y-axis represents the orbital energy. Now you need to pay close attention to the 2s orbital and 2p orbital energy. According to this graph, the 2s orbital energy looks like this. The orbital energy monotonically decreases as the atomic number increase. But for 2p orbital, there's a kink. This is the orbital energy of 2p orbital. There's a kink. Slightly increase after continuing to decrease. This point is nitrogen. This point is oxygen. So, for the nitrogen and the elements to twist left, the energy gap between 2p orbital and 2s orbital is small. For the nitrogen and the elements to its left. But for oxygen and the element to its right, the energy gap between 2p orbital and 2s orbital is widened. This is narrow. This is widened. This is the boundary between nitrogen and oxygen. For nitrogen, the 2p energy gap between 2p and 2s is narrow, but the oxygen, the energy gap between 2p and 2s is widened. This fact plays very, very important role in chapter 6. Chapter 6. When you talk about the molecular orbital, in chapter 6 we are going to construct molecular orbital of nitrogen and oxygen. So when you talk about molecular orbital, nitrogen and oxygen, we are going to talk about this fact again. In nitrogen, the energy gap is small, but for oxygen, the energy gap is very large. Please keep in mind this graph. Now move on to atomic size. As you know, when you from left to right, effective nuclear charge increases. So radius decrease. For example, in third period, sodium and chloride, the atomic radius of sodium is nanometer. The chloride is, so as you can see, when go from left to right, effective nuclear charge increase, so the radius decrease. So this is sodium, this is chlorine. And when the sodium atom lose electron to become sodium plus, the radius decrease, right? In contrast, when chlorine atom accept electrons to become chloride negative ion, the atomic radius increase, right? The radius decrease, radius increase. But the real question is how much increase or how much decrease? The question is, when you measure the radius Na plus, it is radius plus 0.0 nanometers. When the chloride ion becomes chlorine ion, chlorine atom accepts 1 electron to become chloride ion. It is only 1 electron moves, right? Only 1 electron moves, but the atomic size almost doubled. Okay, so only 1 electron moves, but the atomic size changed dramatically. So please keep in mind this fact. And there's a term lanthanide contraction. And in the periodic table, there's a main group element, group 1 and group 2, and there's a transition metal, and there's a main group element appears again. And the transition metal group spans 4 periods. This is 4th period transition metal, 5th period transition, 6th period, and 7th period. And here, one spot, 15 elements of lanthanide elements packed into one slot. Okay, in this slot, 15 elements packed together. So normally in periodic table, this element is called lanthanide. Lanthanide element are pulled out and displayed separately at the bottom. In lanthanide element, F orbital is filled. Similarly, 15 elements are packed together in one slot. This element is called actinide. Actinide also fills F orbital. So in some periodic table, which is called long-term periodic table, this two lanthanide group, actinide group, for this lanthanide group and actinide group, special space is provided. So in long-term periodic table, this group moves to here. Special space is allocated. This is the long-term periodic table. Now, when you measure the atomic radius of 4th period transition metal, the atomic size looks like this. When you go left to right, as just like main group element, effective nuclear charge increase. So atomic radius increase. So we follow same pattern. When you increase the atomic number, atomic radius decrease. It follows the same main group element, but near the end of the transition metal, atomic radius slightly increase. Why? First 5 electrons go to empty d orbital. So when you go from left to right, effective nuclear charge increase. So atomic radius decrease. But 6 electron goes to the already occupied orbital. So 2 electrons repulsive interaction occur. So due to repulsive interaction, slight increase in atomic radius appears. So this is the atomic radius of 4th transition metal. But similarly, 5th element show the same trend, but the principal quantum number increase 1 unit. So 5th element sit above 4th transition metal element. Then how about atomic radius of 6 elements. You might think that 6 elements follow the same train. So when you draw the graph of 6 elements, the atomic radius looks like this. This is expectation, but according to actual experimental observation, the graph looks like this. Actually, according to experimental observation, 6 tensor metal element graph stick together with fifth element. So, the atomic radius of 6th element are very, very similar to 5th element. The atomic radius does not increase for 6th element. This phenomenon is called lanthanide contraction. Because the atomic radius of 6th transition metal is much smaller than expected. This phenomenon is called lanthanide contraction. But the question is this: why is it called lanthanide contraction? When we talk about the transition metal element, why this term arose? Because it is related to this element. Now I compare the atomic radius of fifth element with the sixth element. Right below it, I'm going to compare the atomic radius of these two elements. So to compare these two elements, we need to consider two competing effects. In first effect is that when you go from fifth to sixth, the principal quantum number increase. So when principal quantum number increase, atomic radius may be increased. This is first factor to consider. Second factor is that when you go from fifth to sixth element, you pass through 15 lanthanide elements. When you pass through 15 lanthanide elements, effective nuclear charge increase. When you go up one more, the effective nuclear charge continues to increase. So when you reach this point, the effective nuclear charge enormously increase. So effective nuclear charge increase, so the atomic radius decrease. There's a two competing effect when you compare the radius of fifth element with sixth element. But it happens that the first effect cancels with the second effect almost perfectly. So when you compare the radius of two elements, it is almost identical because these two effects cancel perfectly matched. So without this lanthanide elements, it goes to here. So effective nuclear charge does not go so increase. Then the atomic radius increase. But with the presence of this 15 lanthanide element, effective nuclear charge enormously increase due to the presence of 15 lanthanide elements. So this phenomenon is called lanthanide contraction. Now to ionization energy and electron affinity. And ionization energy, similar to atomic radius, when you go from left to right, effective nuclear charge increase. So ionization energy also increase. So as an example, here in second period, lithium and neon. When you plot the ionization energy from lithium to neon, it follows a general trend. It generally increases. But there's two exceptions for this graph. There's a kink also. There are two exceptions. Here, beryllium, boron, nitrogen, oxygen. The ionization energy of boron is lower than beryllium. Y. So this is the energy level. This is the vacuum state. The electron configuration of beryllium is this. So the electron for beryllium, electron from 2s orbital is removed. So the ionization energy of beryllium are related to the energy level of 2s orbital. But for boron, the electron that is removed from the 2p orbital. So the ionization of energy of boron is related to the energy level of 2p orbital, which is higher than the 2s orbital. So for boron, energy is slightly lower than the beryllium. Now move on to nitrogen and oxygen. The electron configuration of nitrogen looks like this. This is nitrogen. And for oxygen, the electron removed is from the this orbital. Electron removed is from this orbital. In its two electrons repelling each other. So the electron is relatively easy to remove because two electrons are repelling each other. The electron is alone, so it is hard to remove this electron. So the ionization energy of oxygen is slightly lower than the nitrogen. Okay. Let's move on to electron affinity. For electron affinity, as I previously said, there are several elements in each electron affinity could not be measured. A representative example is noble gas. The elements in noble gas cannot be measured because we cannot attach electrons to the noble gas. So it is obvious actually, but surprisingly, some very familiar elements could not be measured. Representative example is nitrogen. We cannot measure the electron affinity of nitrogen because it is so small. So we cannot measure the electron affinity of nitrogen. But what is striking is that right next to the nitrogen is carbon. The electron affinity of carbon is very, very large. It is 112 kilojoules. But the nitrogen is very, very small. Electron affinity of carbon is very, very large, but the electron affinity of carbon is very, very small. This is a mistake. How do you explain this one? As you know, when p orbital are fully occupied, it is noble gas configuration. So it is very hard to remove one electron or put electron is very, very difficult because this configuration is very, very stable. It is very hard to put electron or remove electron because it is very, very stable. But this configuration, P3 configuration, is known to be very, very special. This is very special, but this half-field configuration is also stable. It is well known fact then. So, using this fact, we can explain why electron affinity of carbon is very, very high, but electron affinity of nitrogen is very, very small. For this is the electron configuration of nitrogen, and this is the electron configuration of carbon. For carbon, just one electron away from the stable configuration. So it is hunger for electron, right? Because as I said before, this configuration is very, very stable. But this is the configuration for carbon. So carbon is hunger for one electron, right? So when the electron is put to this place, it releases much energy. So electron affinity is very large for carbon. But for nitrogen, this is the electron configuration of nitrogen. Nitrogen already satisfied this stable configuration. So nitrogen want to stay in this configuration. So additional electron does not welcome because it already stays in the stable electron configuration. Additional electron they don't want. It's unwelcome gas. So electron affinity is very, very small for nitrogen. But this half field state, this one is called this half field stability does not only apply to p orbital, it also applies to d orbital. Similarly, d5 configuration is known to be very, very stable, similar to p3 configuration. I will take you an example. The ionization energy, second ionization energy of vanadium chrome manganese iron vanadium as you can see this graph, some elements stands out, extremely large value. This one stands out, extremely large compared to the vanadium or manganese. This is third ionization energy. In third ionization energy, this element stands out, it's outlier, enormously large compared to the chrome and iron. We can explain this anomaly using this stability. Now, electronic configuration of scandium, chrome. So, I'm sorry. For second ionization is associated with the following reaction. The energy also second ionization in energy associated with this reaction. The electronic configuration of chrome is this one. So the chrome plus is 3d5. So electronic configuration of chrome 5 is 3d5. As I said before, 3d5 is very, very stable. So it is very hard to remove electron from the chrome plus. So the ionization energy is very, very high compared to vanadium and manganese. Okay, sorry. See you next time.